Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Strives Summit podcast. Today with me, I have Mike Meyers, the knuckle-dragging dropout turned BIM nerd, as it says on his LinkedIn profile. Mike, why don't you go introduce yourself a little bit?
Mike Meyers. I'm an electrician by trade. I've been in the construction sector since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. I've come from a family of electricians. My three older brothers are all journeymen. So I've done my apprenticeship under them, spent about 14 years in the field, and about almost 5 years now in the BIM world.
That is awesome. I've been watching your LinkedIn, and I noticed you got some brand new shiny equipment over there where you're at. Do you want to talk about some of the coolest stuff you've seen lately with that and what you're doing to kind of bring that up and use that in your kind of workflow?
So as electricians, again, we utilize those tabletop vendors to output a lot of our content. And a lot of times you've got those machines on site and you get very unpredictable bends. And as we're trying to move towards this prefabrication, the company decided that it was time to go and up the ante a little bit and go and find something better. And so they reached out to a few different people to see kind of what was available on the market and what could do these larger size conduits that we're doing, and settled in on this company out of Italy called Crippa. And so they went and purchased one of these and just lucked out enough that they were able to get one that was coming to the US already to go to a trade show. And so instead of having like a year wait or something to be able to get a machine, we were able to get one in about 8 months time. It wasn't horrible. There was some R&D stuff that slowed that delivery time down, but what we've been able to do from that is more directly connect our BIM models to this machine that it's phenomenal. Like it's one of the coolest things to be able to see is, in comparison to the tabletop bender on a 4-inch, just putting in a 90 on that 4-inch on a Greenlee 881, it takes you about 10 minutes or so with loading time, measuring, bending, checking. And then to see this thing go, it takes 2 minutes or so to pump out a 90. And that's with load time and everything, programming time on the machine and things like that. So it's a phenomenal change, and it's going to be a huge thing for our industry as electricians. There's not a lot of companies that have that ability right now,
Mm-hmm.
and are spending a lot of time bending stuff and wasting valuable information that we have within models, right? We have geometry information that exists. We have all these great pieces of data that can be used. And so this is kind of just that interconnection, or connecting that model to a machine and trying to get a precise output. And that machine, once you calibrate it, we're getting into 0.1 degrees of proficiency within that bend. So that first bend you throw in there, it's good.
Right, and you're talking like big pipe. You're not talking some
Yeah.
little 3/4, half-inch. You're talking 4-inch, 6-inch pipe.
Yep. Yeah, 4-inch pipe on this one
So
with the current bend die that we have.
Yep. So I'm a little familiar with the Crippa bender. I was actually, I forgot what trade show it was last year in Atlanta with a previous company of mine. And the previous company I worked with was a software company that definitely talked about integrating with Crippa benders. And so the Crippa bender to me was like the first, I call it like a Cadillac, because it's a big monster, but what it can do is incredible. There's a lot of benders out there in the world right now that are coming up since last year. Yeah. And the electrical industry is definitely getting their fair share of tech coming through to help them out. So I can imagine having that put in your shop is just like a big old like eyes like this, always looking at it, doing the work for you,
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Awesome.
And spending as much time in the field and bending conduits to be able to be on that other side of it, on the tech side, and be able to see the data that we're able to pull from a model and then distribute to this machine, and then see that machine just it takes my best day of bending and just makes it look like I'm a newbie. It just is spitting out pipes left and right.
How does that make you feel, Mike? As a professional in the
Little
industry for
insecure.
so long. Yeah.
Yeah, little insecure for sure.
Well, I love that you're using that tech. That's awesome. And for everyone out there who doesn't know what electrical bender is, imagine this giant machine with a clamp and basically pushing it through tool dies, extruding it with bends and rotating it as it's needed. Um, I I'll I don't have a video to show right now, but it is incredible. Google Kripa, they're an incredible company out there doing this bender stuff. Um, I want to know how you came up with the name Knuckle Dragon Dropout turned BIM Nerd. I want to know where that came from and how you got to that point. Talk to me about that.
So, one of the biggest things that I had in being an electrician, well, start off with, in all reality, I'm a high school dropout. I have a GED. I started college
Mm-hmm.
and I dropped out of it. And then I went into the trades. Well, in between dropping out of high school and college, I went to the trades and decided that that was where I really enjoyed, and it just fit with my personality more. And one of the biggest issues that I had is I was young and smart-ish, but I had an attitude and I didn't like being told no about things. And so between that and the old school mentality of we've always done it this way, it just always drove me
Oh,
nuts. And I I struggled working for companies. I really struggled with being employed at places because at some point there was something that I hit, a wall I hit where I was young and I was couldn't get to the role that I wanted to, or something didn't make sense and there weren't people who'd listen to me about stuff, and kind of the spoiled nature of me was like, you're not gonna listen, I'm gone type thing. And so it's it was my way of, the moniker is kind of my way of laughing at my past. Like, for a long time, I tried to hide the fact that I was a job jumper. Like, the reality of it is I was a job jumper. I couldn't stay employed for a long time without moving to another one. But to me now, is that's my past. That's what made me. And it's the reality of it. Like,
mm-hmm.
I can't get past that. I was a stupid person. I'm not stupid most days, but I was dumb as hell about things. So I have to be able to take it tongue in cheek and just be able to laugh about where I was to where I am now. And that's kind of where it came from.
Yeah, I just want to say, Mike, I love the story you have because one of the things, and I probably said this every podcast so far, is I want to inspire the next generation of maybe they're not good at high school. Maybe they did drop
Yep.
out. Maybe they don't think there's any direction. You are living, breathing proof that there is a direction to go
Yeah.
to elevate your life and education. A big thing about it is BIM in general is not a subject or thing that people know about mainstream. I mean,
Yeah.
I was just at a little gathering yesterday downtown, and I mentioned what I do, and everyone's like, "What is BIM?" And it was a tech thing. They were talking about OpenAI and stuff like that. I'm like, "Yeah, BIM is like tech. It's all tech now." There was this thing called drafting, you know, and you went to school for drafting, and you had erasers and pens, and if you like to draw, you maybe got into that. Well, now it's just, can you code? Do you like
Yep.
playing The Sims? Because that's what I do every day. Do you want to play with a VR
Yep.
headset? Do you want to play with a giant machine that bends electrical conduit all day? You can code it and command it to do whatever you want. Like, that is construction nowadays. And I don't think it's said enough for a lot of these people coming out of college. They want to do game design, which is great.
Yeah.
Game design is BIM, or basically gamification of construction. I build
Yep.
buildings all day like I do with The Sims, and I send it to, let's say, a Kripa bender, and then it puts all the pieces together. The satisfaction, I talked to, I think it was Derek Miller I had on here earlier, the satisfaction about that is you can go and see your finished product. You can touch it, you can feel it. You can walk through a building and say, yeah, I know exactly where that goes. And it's like I call it like a proud papa moment. Like, yeah, I did that, kind of like a pride thing.
Yep.
But I think it's not said enough. And, I do hope that this podcast reaches that generation, has kind of an influence on it. But no, I love your story, and I don't think anyone should be any ashamed about that. I mean, I'm even pushing for get into the trades and then do BIM, because you are that much more
Yep.
valuable, right?
Right.
You go be an electrician for so long and then drawing what the electricians need. insanely valuable.
Yeah. It's
So
that
no, I
that
think it's
alone
awesome.
has been able to take my career from where it was to where it is now, and it's an amazing thing. Like as you talk about being in high school, like my father was the VOTEC teacher. He was the shop teacher at my high school. He taught AutoCAD or DataCAD at his time and hand drafting.
Yeah.
And I didn't take those classes. I took one semester maybe of it, and I was bored of it. And now I look back, I'm like, man, I'm an idiot. Like I could have gone into this at that time, but AutoCAD it didn't quite grab me the same as what this technology does. Like
Mm-hmm.
it can generate an obsession for sure.
Right. Yeah, I definitely had like an AutoCAD course in high school. And it was one of those courses you took for a semester and stuff, and I was really good at it. But I mean, at that point, it was all keyboard, and like it was
Yep.
no mouse. All the practices were keyboard stuff. So you're putting in all these equations and stuff to go from one point to the other, doing isometrics. And to me, that was like math, and it was fun and easy. But it's like, yeah, I'm not passionate about it. But that's easy and fun. And honestly, for the foreseeable future, I went into like drafting tech, but I was more manufacturing. I was SolidWorks. I was 3D printing, and then
Okay.
I came out here where I'm at now in Idaho, and then I started doing modular construction. It was like the perfect mixture for me, and at that point it clicked, and I was like, yeah, that's my calling. This is what I'm doing forever now. So
That's
tell
exactly.
me, tell me about. I know we had a little brief history, but tell me about your history coming up. Like, um, how did you go into the trades? Like, I want to hear your path so that these people listening can also hear that path and maybe get some inspiration to kind of follow that.
So the easiest thing was the way that I got into the trades was really, really easy. Again, I have three older brothers that are all electricians. Two of them owned companies, and
Mm-hmm.
I come from a family of seven. So I'm a large family, and football season was coming up the next year, and one of my brothers was like, "Hey, I need a gopher." It's like, "What?" It's like, "I need a gopher." I was like, "Okay." He's like, "You want some money for football, right?" Yeah. All right, come with me. So it was as simple as that, and literally I was the guy who was in the attic and in the digging holes and in the crawl space of these houses because I was the youngest. And in Idaho at that time, you could I'm probably going to say this wrong, but so long as you're working with low voltage at the age of 14, you can have a supervisor there, and you can technically be pulling wire. You can start getting your apprenticeship license at 16, and then start working there. So I started about 14 years old, and I was pulling low voltage every once in a while. I was pulling Romex as well and stuff with my brothers there, and that got me started into it. But I'm the youngest out of all of those brothers, out of all my siblings. And so there came a point where I had to step away from working for them because kind of that same concept is y'all see me as the youngest, and anything I say is never going to be taken with the same weight as someone else. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had to spread my wings and go and try other companies and moved into doing heavy industrial, did commercial for a little bit there, worked on a bunch of mine sites and things like that. Got to see some great things in the trades and travel the US. Like it's it was one of the greatest things that it could ever happen to me. There was a little while there that I decided, okay, I don't want to be an electrician. I'm going to be an iron worker. And so I took 2 years and was an iron worker for a while. And that was, to me, that was the greatest thing that could have happened to me because it instilled a work ethic into me that I didn't have before. There,
Mm-hmm.
there's something crazy about those individuals that you have to respect because they know how to work hard and party hard all day, every day. It's crazy. Takes some insanity. So
I love
that's
that. I love that. I mean, it's incredible. Like your story. Um, what I love about it is there's so many people that probably resonate with that story. Me, I didn't know I wanted to do. I was 28 when I found out what I was going to do with the modular factory. I
yeah,
had jobs from, I did volunteer firefighting and medic, and I did pinball machine parts, and I did test equipment on airplanes. I painted fences, and my dad had an HVAC company. I mean, I bartended for 10 years. Like, there's so many different things that these experiences culminate and guide you to a point in your life where you want to do things. What I love about your story is, yeah, you had a lot of help getting into the trades, but you finally were like, no, I'm going to do trades on my own time. And you went out and you found different jobs and finding your niche. So I want to know what turned you from that to BIM. How did that go?
Luck in all reality. I was sitting in Wyoming
Okay.
working in the solar, putting in a solar field, and had a recruiter call me up and said, "Hey, I have this company that's looking for guys that want to do BIM." It's like, "Oh, okay. I don't know about if I can handle that or not. Like, that's not my background." And like, that's okay. We don't necessarily want someone who has that experience. We want to be able to train someone. What we're looking for is someone with that field experience. It's like, would you be interested in it? Okay, yes, I would. Um, and it went off from there. Like, the odd part about it is about 7 years before that, I had injured my back on a job site, and while I was down,
Mm-hmm.
my wife was we were looking over things and what I could be doing while I was injured and stuff. And she's like, "Hey, there's this BIM classes that you could go and take, like these Votech classes." And I looked at it and read it, and I was like, "Nah, not smart enough to do that stuff." And so she laughed at me and she was like, "Whatever." But come to fruition later, I get this call and they say, "Hey, we want to try and train you for this, and now this is my area."
That's awesome. And so, if for people who don't know, I did BIM for 3 years and had no idea I was doing it. That's how kind of secretive that industry is. Unless you're in it and you're talking, if you're on LinkedIn, right, you'll know about it. I was just in there drafting at that point with this new software that was 3D. I ended up making every part and piece and doing assembly lines, and like, you don't know it's BIM. So if you're out there
Right?
doing Revit and you're not aware, you're doing BIM. Um,
Yeah.
Revit is not BIM. Make that very clear. Everyone out there, I'm going to
Right.
get it in the comments. Revit is not BIM. The process.
Yep.
But if you're using Revit to make construction documents or build off of, you are technically doing a BIM process. No, I really love that. I mean, a lot of people don't understand is that you fall into it. You literally fall into BIM. And I think everyone I've talked to said that. Because just like you were like, well, I don't know if I could do that, and next thing you know, you're doing it. And now you're developing code and you're a coder now. It's just, you have
The
gone
weird
from
world.
one end of the spectrum, from a knuckle drag and dropout, to a developer. It's kind of crazy. So I'm super happy you're here now. So let's talk about how did you grow your BIM experience? I know you took the Bowtech classes. What else did you do for that? On job. Let's go on job training.
Yeah, the biggest was I again got that job offer with Faith Technologies, and they brought us in and kind of threw us into the fire. They didn't really have a great program for training at the moment, or not within our department. The people that I got brought in with were all really new into it. That the entire team was, and so the training program wasn't great. But they gave us a practice model and said, "Here's the tool, here's your computer, get started trying to familiarize with yourself with it." And as I was playing around with it, things kind of started clicking. My nerd days kind of came together, and started realizing this kind of makes sense. I like this. And about a month into my training, I got pulled into a project and like, "All right, you're now working." Okay. All right. And it just took off from there. And again, that nerd side of my youth, the days playing StarCraft and Diablo and stuff, just came out, and this became an iteration of that. This is the grown up version of it. And so
Mm-hmm.
again, the having that background within the construction field was a massive help, as but having that nerd side also didn't hurt. So again, it once I got in there and I started seeing the value of it. Again, being from the field side and not knowing what this is and what it would bring, but then to be able to see it and to compare it to jobs you've been on and what it would have been like to have some of these prefab kits come to you is phenomenal. And so then it became an obsession, and it's just been that since.
And now what are you doing? You're fighting with your electrician on site, telling him, no, this is how it's got to be done.
Right.
And it's incredible that like you're you've got a different mindset now. Also, by the way, if you're playing games right now and you want to go into game design, you want to do BIM. I'm just going to say it right out. I mean,
Yeah.
we were all nerds when we were little. We're a little different generation, but now people going into game design, like we talked about that. This is the perfect reason why you want to start reaching out and getting into BIM, because it's all 3D modeling, it's all code. And I mean, even BIM translates into something different. Like if you're doing architecture, for instance, there's programs like Unreal Engine and Twinmotion, which all the game developers are fairly familiar with, that you could bring your products into and make these beautiful renders. And I mean, if you wanted to, you can make a blueprint and make a game out of it, right? There's so much value in just understanding the BIM side of construction, especially with game design experience. So, no, that's awesome. I love that. Okay, so the next piece I want to get into, because I've seen a lot of this on LinkedIn as well, is how did you get into coding? Because I struggle every day trying to figure out if I want to learn another language and if coding is going to bring me happiness or not.
So it faced that I got this opportunity where they threw us into these projects and we were doing our thing and going about. But as I was working on it, I got an opportunity brought to me of hey, you want to move into a BIM specialist role? And my mentality again was kind of the same. I don't know that I have enough knowledge for that. Like, you've got the drive, we'll teach you. And so they gave that opportunity to get in and start manipulating projects and families and getting outside of that project work and getting into the families and starting to do some of the parametrics within those was interesting to me and a lot of fun, but very frustrating. Like, the families are the building blocks of everything you do, and it's really, really important to be able to have a good family made. And so I was struggling with, now that I've got a good family made or good families that I can work with, well, now there's a lot of redundancies. Like, the one that killed me the most was getting data entry. I'm
Mm,
horrible with data entry, as is anybody else, and that's where it started to kind of to click, and why I started driving into it was you'd try to make a schedule and everybody would enter something just that little bit different, and so your schedules wouldn't populate correctly. And I started looking into Dynamo and thinking, all right, I see people talking about this and getting set in values. Looks like it's what I want to do. And so I started playing with it and struggling my butt off, trying to figure out how to make that work. And then once things started kind of coming together, I was like, oh, well, there's a lot of repetitious clicks that I make every day that suck. I don't want to do those things. Like, maybe I should try this a little bit harder. And so I I just kept going with it. So I thankfully had the opportunity with that role to be able to try and work on some scripts and things like that. And then once you get to a certain point on those scripts, it becomes a spaghetti factory and it's confusing. And so I decided, okay, I want to try and learn Python, see if I can start doing that. And I realized how much greater it was. It was so cool to see things come together. You type a few lines and it would do what you wanted. Like, that was so exciting. And I just kept trying with it. And it's got me to where I am today. It's just, again, another one of
that's
those things of, I hate repetitious things. My attention span doesn't handle those things very well.
mhm. I think we have the same attention span. Um, Dynamo script. If it's not a common script that's done, it's typically done for a lot of like software in the BIM field. And correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I believe it's just visual coding for coders out there that are interested. Dynamo is just nodes and strings at that point. No, that's awesome. I wish I had that mentality to get in there, but every time I look at it, I'm like, not today. Probably
It's a
not today.
nightmare.
Maybe someday. Yeah, yeah. I feel like I would get frustrated and give up real quick, but I commend those that do it. And I see you doing all that stuff. Even now with that new machine you got in the shop floor, I see you kind of working with that too. Um,
Uh,
yeah, definitely. If you're out there, follow Mike for that stuff. He is. I want to say you're probably the most inspiring coder out there doing it for construction because of your background and then just perseverance. If anyone wants to get ahead in any company doing any kind of BIM, it's perseverance, right? You gotta show that you want to learn, and then you are just gonna be moved up the ranks like like really quick, like it's nothing. So
It's
no, that's incredible.
and there's a lot of companies that are starving to be able to have just little workflows, and even just within Dynamo. Dynamo is a perfect introduction into coding, especially if you don't know anything about it. It gets you familiar with syntax, and coming from the field, that word is so foreign. It's like, what is that, right? And once you get used to how you need to talk to it, it starts getting you comfortable with it, and then you can start moving into other things. Now, it takes a little crazy individual to continue with it because it's a headache, but in the end, again, it's like being an electrician. Like at the end of the day, when you can turn on the power, there's nothing greater. You can turn on a light and see what you did. There's nothing greater. So if you can run a script or a program and have it finally work, that's better than drugs any day.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Mike. I'm gonna quote that. That's gonna be on everything. It's better than drugs any day. So I was gonna ask you next, what's the most exciting thing you're doing with BIM right now? And I mean, I'm gonna have to say it's coding. And correct me if I'm wrong on that.
It, it, it really is. The coding part of it is probably my very favorite aspect of all of it. Troubleshooting
Mm-hmm.
and troubleshooting is always a fun one for me, being able to figure out problems, user problems that they're having with the software, with just Revit alone is interesting to me, just because it throws a new flavor in there. And
Mm-hmm.
building families and good parametric families that have really good nested stuff within them is fun, but it gets repetitious and boring. But the really exciting part, again, is that coding. Like, again, to be able to go from Dynamo to now starting to push out add-ins is phenomenal, right? To be able to see something and have a button on that ribbon that you made, it's so addicting.
I'm so happy you mentioned that because my next question was gonna be, are you doing anything outside of Revit coding? But talk about the add-ins for a little bit. So people who don't understand what that is or what it means to put it on a ribbon, kind of go through that process.
Yeah. I'm really not doing anything outside of Revit at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
There's some stuff that I've got, some ideas that I have on my notepads and everything of what I want to be able to try and achieve just for day-to-day stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
because my obsession is with Revit, majority of it stems or sits within that. And so the biggest problem I had with Dynamo was if I've got a user group that I'm helping support and I'm telling them, hey, I've got a script that you can run to help automate some of these steps, their eyes kind of glaze over and they're like, that sounds foreign. I don't know that I want to use that. And so buy-in on that is tough, and maintaining that's tough because the APIs change so much between Revit versions that I have a script that works really good in 20, but then I get it in 21 and it's broke. I get it in 22 and it's another
Mm-hmm.
break. And so maintaining it's a pain, and that's what drove me into the add-ins portion. If I'm spending the time making these processes and nobody wants to use them, then I wasted my time. And so I feel like you can get better buy-in or better utilization of a tool if you've got a button there, because then it's people are looking at it like, oh, okay, that's easy. I can just push that button and it will give me some prompts. And it's an interesting one. Again, a year ago, I couldn't I couldn't code in C#. I didn't know much about it whatsoever. And an add-in for Revit has to be based upon C#. And the easiest way of going about it is with that. And so in that year and a half's time, there's been a lot of learning to be able to get a button to finally show up on that ribbon. And thankfully, there's some really, really good templates out there to be able to help you get to that point. But it just takes some belligerence and a little bit of trying every day to get to that point.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I know a lot of add-ins. Like I use some add-ins for manufacturers and stuff. But I can imagine some personal add-ins I would love to add to my workflow that I'm doing every day. For instance, there's third-party softwares that do everything, right? But there's one workflow, and everyone works in Revit differently. And if you're familiar with it, like for me, I train all the time, so I'm training a lot of people on Revit fundamentals and some advanced things as well. But for me, I'm a button pusher. I don't have any keyboard shortcuts. I teach like you got to use keyboard shortcuts, but I can't do it because I'm so used to pushing buttons now. So my workflow, if you guys are familiar with the Revit ribbon, we're gonna get deep dive here for a minute. In the Revit ribbon under architectural structure and all that stuff, it's the same thing for set plane or component. It's the same thing. My go-to is to hit the architecture tab and hit it. Even, no matter what tab I'm in, that's my go-to. That's my workflow. If I could somehow turn that into a button that's always on top, like an add-in that would just always be there, that's the simple stuff that you're talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I look
I
at
would go ahead.
I look at
Yeah.
anything that I have to do the same set of steps multiple times in a day, and those are the low-hanging fruit that I'm going to try and achieve with a script or an add-in, and there's tons of them. There's tons of little things that you can make simple programs to do. They don't take much time to turn out. It just takes some dedication to try and figure it out.
So what's your most effective one you got going on right now that you do? Let's say one that you touch just about every day.
Because I'm not modeling, I don't do a ton with it anymore, and I'm not utilizing. But one of the tools that I've set up for our company at Hunt is the ability to push parameters down elements. So speaking from the electrical side, in electrical components or conduits and fittings, you have connectors on them. And one of the biggest drawbacks of conduits is anytime that you adjust it, anytime you grab it and move it, you just erased every piece of data that you entered into it. The good thing is all that data still exists within the fitting, but it's now gone within that straight section if you change the length of it at all or messed with it. And so one of the tools that I've set up is being able to grab one or multiple conduits. It has to be one per run, or conduit fitting, but then it populates or brings up a UI that has the name of every parameter that is available that has a value within that conduit. You can then mass select whichever parameters you want and then push that value to the entire run. And that to me, I think is just, there's other tools that do exactly that, but it's just such an easy, low-key thing that just saves you a ton of time. You don't have to worry. You enter data into one of your fittings and you know that that's your static point. You can always get it and push it later on through. And I think that's a pretty big one. There's a second iteration of that's you grab one thing and you can copy the values to many. It's the exact same UI and everything, same workflows, but instead of using the connectivity of the conduits, you're just selecting the one you want to take it from and the many that you want to push it to. But again, it's simplistic, but it's a time saver because data entry sucks.
I just want to say talking to you is so cool. When you're talking about this development stuff, I'm like geeking out over here. I'm like, this dude came from electrical world and he's over here developing now where he doesn't even touch Revit anymore. He's just in there coding. I am thoroughly impressed. I think it's incredible. Actually, I wanted to ask, you're in Tennessee. I'm going to assume Nashville area by your jersey there.
Yep.
What is what is the acceptance of BIM kind of in that community? Or are you not aware of what's going on out there yet?
Pretty big, actually. All the major
Yeah.
contractors around here that I've spoken to all have BIM departments. It's really because we do have so many high rises going up and so many outside contractors that have to come in and try and stay or to handle the amount of work going in. It was brought in pretty early. When I first showed up in Nashville about 7 years ago, I saw a Navis model for the first time and was able to play with it.
Hmm.
Didn't know much beyond that, but in yeah, our meetings that we'd go through on job site, they bring up the model and start going through things, and so I was able to see it at that point. But again, all the major contractors that I've spoken with have some sort of BIM department with varying degrees of skill, but everybody's trying. There's a lot of them that are putting fab shops out there because they're like, this is the future. We see a value here, which is awesome.
It's amazing. I mean, even now, like the industry's grown so much that every company you probably talk to is hiring a BIM guy. They're always hiring.
Yeah,
And I mean, if anyone out there is interested, just go and talk to them. I'm pretty sure they'd be more than happy to train you on it and get you set up. I think that's kind of where
yeah.
we're at right now. Um, yeah, out here in Idaho, we're a little slow on the pickup for BIM. Um, Idaho's a good old American, old-fashioned kind of state. You got a hammer and a nail, you're building buildings. You
Born and
understand, though.
raised, so I
Um,
know.
yeah. um, so I'm always curious about different landscapes in different areas and how accepting or like available it is out there. So that's really interesting to hear. Um, yeah, if any of you out there want to reach out to Mike, Mike, why don't you tell them where they can find you if you got anything you want to share about what's coming up lately, or anything you're talking about LinkedIn you're excited about. Why don't you go ahead and share some of that stuff before we head out?
Yeah. So I'm pretty much the only social media I am on is LinkedIn. So you can search me out. Again, Knuckle Dragging BIM is the easiest way of probably finding me on there. And what I utilize LinkedIn for isn't the same as what other people do. I'm not looking for the professional aspect of it. I'm looking to be able to share my failures and be able to gain some insight from people that are there. What I've found is there's a whole community there that is willing to help. And it's the greatest thing. I've been able to leverage that to be able to get to where I am today. If it weren't for the people that are on there, in essence, I wouldn't be where I am today because the developer of Bird Tools, Madge Makoff, he's the reason that I started in Python. He sent me a message one day. He's like, "Hey, why don't you just start trying with that stuff?" I'm like, I don't know that I'm smart enough. He's like, "Just try it." So again, like there's a huge community of people that are so supportive that we're technically competitors in ways, but there's so
Hmm.
much work out there that nobody treats it like that, which is a good thing. Yeah, you're not sharing IP, but you're sharing concepts and how you're kind of getting through some of these problems, and that's what I'm on there and trying to do. Like, I try to take it lightheartedly and say, "Oops, I screwed up a lot," because you know what, life's freaking short as is, and nobody's perfect. I don't want to pretend like I'm anywhere near that. Like, I'm constantly struggling with stuff. So that's that's what I'd spend a lot of time doing. And when I'm not working, I'm working and coding on the side. So I'm trying to develop an add-in as well, and at some point we'll push it out and put it out on the market. And it's probably going to be one of those freebie things, but it's just kind of one of those things of passion. It's I'm learning how to do something, and hopefully it helps someone down the road type stuff.
Yeah, I love LinkedIn for the community. Um, I mean, we would not have met with it without LinkedIn, right? You're correct on the way of just talking workflows and just like I didn't really know. Like I had a LinkedIn forever, but until I started posting and like reaching out and talking to people, you really don't know what you know. Like you
Yeah.
always there's a common thing you've been saying is you didn't know if you were smart enough, right? And there's all these people
Yeah.
telling me like, yeah, you could do it. And so, I mean, I've had that same epiphany with a lot of stuff I've been going on for the past couple of years. It's like, I don't know if I can do that. Next thing you know, I'm helping run a scrum board, and I'm like, I don't know what that is, but let's do it. So I've it's incredible the community on LinkedIn is, and I would say if you're in any kind of industry and you're on LinkedIn, definitely reach out to people in the industry. And if you're in the coding and you want to see some of Mike's accomplishments and failures, please follow him as well on LinkedIn. Well, Mike, I do appreciate you being here for today. I want to thank everybody for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow. This is Summit Podcast. And also follow Strive on all the socials. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.